The people telling you to stop grinding LeetCode are wrong. But so is literally everything you are doing on LeetCode right now. And I know that is frustrating thing to hear because you have probably done 60, 80, or maybe 150 problems. You feel like you are putting in the work, and honestly, you are. The problem is the work you are putting in is training you to fail a 2026 interview in a very specific way that nobody is talking about. I just came out of the placements, got a software engineering offer, and I watched this whole debate play out in real time. The LeetCode is dead crowd, the just do striver A to Z crowd, the people switching to portfolio projects because they heard DSA rounds were going away, they were all wrong. And I want to show you exactly why and exactly what I saw actually work. So here is why I think you should listen to me for the next 10 minutes and I will keep this short. I'm not a senior engineer with 10 years of insight telling you what worked in 2016. I'm a software engineer who just got the job last year. I just went through the placement season in 2025. I had a skin in the game 4 months ago. The anxiety, the online assessment grind at 2 a.m., the rejection emails, all of this is still very recent to me. And while I was going through it, I was paying attention, not just to my own process, but to what was happening around me. Who was cracking the DSA round? Who was getting filtered out even though they had solved way more problems than I had? There was a pattern, and it was not the pattern I expected. I also build stuff on the side like SaaS products, which I sell, real products that are live, and I have a bit of different lens on the whole interview thing because of that. So what I'm going to tell you today is not a textbook advice. It is what I actually observed, combined with some data that I think is genuinely eye-opening. Alright, let's get into it. So you have probably seen the takes, AI can solve lead code, companies will stop testing it, just build the projects, DSA is irrelevant to engineering work. And look, I get it. These takes feel satisfying because there is a kernel of truth in there. But here is what actually happened in 2026 placements. And I think this surprised a lot of people, including me. The DSA rounds did not get easier, they got harder. Not easier, harder. More obscure, weirder problems, graph problems with conditions you have never seen in NEET Code 150, DP variants that are not in the Striver A to Z sheet. Companies were specifically designing rounds to be harder to game. And the reason is pretty obvious when you think about it for a second. ChatGPT can pass a medium lead code problem before you even finish reading the constraints. Companies know this. Every hiring manager knows this. So what do you think their response is? Drop DSA rounds? No. They made them harder. They shifted to problems where the solution is not just one Google search away, where you actually have to think in the room. There's a HackerRank report from 2025 that found 40% of the hiring managers straight up admit they do not trust the lead code style interviews as a true predictor of job performance. 40%. But they're keeping the rounds anyway because everyone else is keeping them. Because it is the filtering mechanism that exists and no one has built a better one at scale yet. So the round is not going away because companies distrust it. The round is staying because AI made them panic and now they are leaning on it harder while also making it weirder. Here is the other thing happening that I think is underreported. There's a real bifurcation going on in how different companies are interviewing. On the one end, large companies, the big product companies, they are doubling down on DSA, more rounds, harder problems, sometimes 5 or 6 interview stages, because they are terrified of hiring someone who is just prompting their way through everything and has no actual understanding. On the other hand, startups, small product companies, some of them have completely flipped the script. I have heard the interviews where they literally hand you Copilot, give you a code base, and say, build this feature in 45 minutes, we will watch. Vibe coding interviews, someone called them. This is a real thing. So the market is not moving in one direction. It is splitting. And the worst position you can be in is prepared for neither. But for most of you watching this, for people doing campus placements at decent companies, the DSA round is very much alive. The question is not whether to prepare for it. The question is how. Okay, so here is the thing I kept noticing. I know people who have done 300 plus problems on lead code. I myself have done more than 900 problems on lead code. Easy, medium, hard, all of it. And they were getting filtered in the first DSA round. Not because they could not solve the problem, because they could not survive the actual format of the interview. And I think the reason is really specific. The way 90% of the people use lead code, and I was guilty of this too for a while, is they open a problem, they read it, they think for a bit, they maybe check a hint or look at the discussion, they get the logic and they code it, they submit, they move on. Maybe they watch on Striver video to understand the pattern. And that entire process happens in silence, in your head, with zero pressure, at your own pace. Now put yourself in the actual interview room. Someone is sitting across from you or watching your screen. You have got 30-40 minutes for the whole problem. And they're not just waiting for you to type the right answer. They're watching you. They're asking you questions while you are thinking. What is your approach here? What happens if the input is empty? Can you walk me through the step? What is the time complexity of what you have just written? This is a completely different skill from what you practiced, and there is a data on this. A study found that developers who failed technical interviews were failing not on the DSA itself, but on explaining their thought process, handling edge cases, and communicating under pressure. The DSA knowledge was there, the ability to perform that knowledge in front of another human under time pressure, that was the gap. And honestly, when I heard that stat, I immediately knew it was true because I had felt it myself. There were problems I had solved before, I had done the exact pattern before. And in the first couple of interviews, I bombed because my brain froze the moment someone was watching me. Here is what silent lead code grinding is actually training you to do. It is training you to recognize patterns in a low pressure environments and get to a correct solution eventually. That is a useful skill, but it is not the skill being tested in an interview. An interview is testing. Can you think out loud coherently? Can you catch your own edge cases before the interviewer has to point them out? Can you start with a brute force and then visibly, verbally walk toward an optimization? Can you communicate under mild social pressure without your logic falling apart? And the brutal thing is, you can do 200 problems in silence and still be completely unprepared for that because you have never practiced it. I'm not going to lie, the first time I tried explaining the problem out loud to myself while solving, it felt embarrassing. It felt slow. It felt like it was making me worse. Because I was used to thinking in my head and it felt faster. But it was not faster. I was just hiding my confusion from myself. When you force yourself to say the logic out loud, you catch the holes in your reasoning immediately. The interviewer does not catch them first, you do. And that is the completely different interview experience. So here is what I actually changed in my preparation and what I saw work in the people around me who were cracking DSA rounds consistently. First thing, stop solving problems with headphones on and your internal monologue running. Start narrating out loud, like actually out loud. It feels stupid, but do it anyway. When you open a problem, say out loud, okay, so what are they asking? Then read the constraint and say, right. So n can be up to 10 to the fifth, which means I probably cannot do anything worse than O of n log n. Then say, let me think about the brute force first. Then actually talk yourself through it. This feels uncomfortable for about a week. After that, it becomes natural and it completely changes how you perform under observation. Second thing, make edge case thinking a deliberate habit and not an afterthought. Before you write a single line of code, spend 2 minutes just saying out loud all the edge cases you can think of. Empty array, single element, all duplicates, negative numbers if applicable, maximum size input, what happens at the boundaries. Most people skip this entirely and do it as a checkbox after they have written the code. Interviewers notice when you do it before. It signals that you think like an engineer, not like someone who just memorized the solution. Third thing, and this one is underrated, practice explaining your time and space complexity as you code, not after. Most people finish the code and then the interviewer asks, what is the complexity? And then they go, yeah, O of n, I think, while trying to reverse engineer it. If you practice narrating complexity as you go, like I'm using a hash map here, so that O of n space, it becomes automatic. And you are not being asked to recall it under pressure. You are just saying what you are actually thinking. Fourth, change how you time yourself. A lot of people set a timer of 45 minutes and try to solve the problem. That is fine. But do not just track whether you solved it. Track how long did it take you to articulate the first approach. How many minutes before you started writing code? Did you explore the brute force first or did you just try to jump to the optimal? Interviews reward structured problem solving, not just getting to the answer. And the last thing, this is the one that made the biggest difference for me personally. Do mock interviews. Actual ones, not lead code contest. A real person watching you, timing you, asking you questions. Find a person who is also preparing. Swap. 20 problems like this will do more for your interview performance than 200 problems solved in silence. I know that is less comfortable. That is actually why most people skip it. And that is exactly why the people who do it have a visible edge. Let me tell you what I actually observed in placements. The people who were consistently clearing DSA rounds, and I'm not talking about the top 1 or 2 people, I'm talking about the people who were reliably getting through. They had one thing in common that I noticed pretty quickly. They were comfortable being wrong out loud. What I mean is, they would say, okay, my first thought is we could do this with a nested loop. That is obviously going to be slow. Let me think what we can optimize. They would catch their own mistakes. They would say, wait, actually that does not handle this case before the interviewer said anything. And that is what the interviewers were watching for. Not just does this person know the algorithm, but does this person think like someone I would want to debug code with at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday when something is on fire. I know guys, absolute monster people who have done very good on lead code. They have solved like more than 400 problems, but they bombed almost every DSA round they sat. Meanwhile, there were people who had done half as many problems, but they had been doing mock interviews for 2 months. They were sailing through. The report I mentioned earlier, 47% of the developers failing interviews despite getting the correct solution. Nearly half, think about that. Nearly half of people who solved the problem technically still did not get the offer. The execution gap is real, and it is specifically about communication, not correctness. That is the 2026 interview. You can be correct and still lose. You have to be correct and communicative and structured and visibly thoughtful all at once. And that is a trainable skill, but you have to train it deliberately. Look, I'm not here to tell you that lead code is the answer to everything or that it is pointless. The reality is more boring than both of these takes. Lead code is a tool. It is a reasonably good proxy for a certain kind of structured thinking under constraints. Companies use it because it scales, not because it is perfect. But it is the game right now. And answer to a flawed game is not to refuse to play it. It is to understand what it is actually testing and prepare for that specific thing. What it is actually testing in 2026 is not whether you memorized 200 patterns. It is whether you can think, communicate, and reason out loud under mild pressure in front of another person. That is the skill. And the weird thing is, most people grinding lead code right now are accidentally skipping that skill entirely. You are spending hours every week training to do something in the context that does not exist in your actual interview. And the interview has a person in it. Your practice does not. The gap is what kills people. Fix that. Just fix that one thing, and I genuinely think your interview performance will change faster than you expect. Alright, if this was helpful, subscribe. I make videos about real stuff, about AI, about interviews, about my own journey. And if you are in the placements right now or preparing for the next cycle, best of luck. Now just go build, go learn something. I'm watching you.